Hello guys, welcome back to my channel Automation Hub Sathak, and in continuation with the English video of Java, I'll tell today what is the exception hierarchy of the exception class. And if you have watched my Hindi video, this particular thing took me a lot of time, close to 25 minutes to design this. I'm not very good with designing these diagrams in MS Paint. It takes a lot of time for me. So what I've done is I'm not going to extend this video for 30 minutes. I have created this screenshot. I'll just explain what it is, and then you can take this up and you can take a screenshot of the same. I mean, you can just take a screenshot of this particular image and you can just prepare for the interview. It is very important. So let's go ahead and learn. Fine. So we are learning about exceptions, and today's topic basically covers two things. This is one, what is the hierarchy of exceptions, and the other part is, which I've already kept in note format, is difference between exception and error. I'll tell each and everything, but let us first understand the hierarchy diagram of exceptions. We know that in Java, the parent of all the classes is object class. This is one thing which we know, right? So this object class inherits a class known as throwable, and exception class, the parent class of exception is throwable class. Technically, throwable class, this particular class which you see here, inherits two classes, exception and error. Okay, so these are the classes which are there, and typically exception is divided into two types. So let me make a notepad here, and so that you can make certain notes. See, we all know object class is the parent of all classes in Java. It is also asked in interview question. Okay, throwable class is the parent of exception class in Java. Okay, generally there are two types of exceptions. Basically they are divided into two types. Okay, the first type is excuse me, compile time exception, and we also call this as checked exception. The other one is runtime exception, and this one we also call as unchecked exception. So in interview, if somebody will ask you what are the different types of exceptions in Java, you will say there are two types of exceptions. One, compile time exception, and runtime exception. Another important interview question is, what is the difference? Okay, there is one funny question which is asked in the interview. What is the difference between compile time exception and runtime exception? Okay, so they ask in interview difference between compile time and runtime exception. So funnily, people, those who do not know the answer, they say this. The answer that we receive is, an exception occurring at compile time is known as compile time exception, and an exception occurring at runtime is known as runtime exception. This is absolutely wrong answer. Always remember, exceptions occur only at runtime. No exception occurs at compile time. So please don't give this vague answer. Exceptions occurring at compile time are compile time exceptions, and at runtime or runtime exceptions. No, exceptions only occur at runtime. So if you say this answer that exceptions occurring at compile time are compile time exceptions, then it is a completely wrong answer. The interviewer will immediately reject you, or he or she will take your interview, but eventually you'll get rejected. So don't give this vague answer. It is not true. This is the right answer. Exceptions only occur at runtime. Okay. Now then, why are we learning about different type of compile time and runtime exceptions? We'll go ahead and I'll tell you all that. So this is a small look and feel of how these things work. Now let's understand the hierarchy of this exception class. See, throwable inherits two classes, exception and error. For the time being, we'll keep aside error. Let's understand exception. Exceptions, there are multiple exceptions. The most important exceptions I have listed down. There are much more than I can remember or this image can accommodate. There are thousands of exceptions. I don't think anyone remembers. but still the ones which are most widely used or used in some automation, whatever, are these. If you remember this much, then I think it's more than enough. So the various kinds of exceptions are class not found exception, no such method exception, interrupted exception. And don't feel that interrupted exception has no such method exception. I know interrupted exception should have been in this one horizontal line, but because of space constraints and my ordinary designing skills of MS Paint, this small rectangle box is on top. But technically this is this is one of the exceptions. Class not found exception, no such method exception, interrupted exception, SQL exception, remote exception, and input output exception. And input output exception has these three classes: end of file exception, file not found exception, and interrupted exception. So if you design much better than me, which I'm sure you guys can do, so these are all the important exceptions. And EOF exception, file not found exception, interrupted exceptions are classes for IO exception. Okay, so and this whole thing which I've marked in red are actually all compile time exception. That means they are checked exceptions. Please remember this. And one more exception which is very much important is also known as runtime exception. And runtime exception has multiple other exceptions as well, like arithmetic exception, class cast exception, null pointer exception. I'm sure you must be remembering a lot of these. Index out of bound exceptions, like let's say for example you try to print the value of an integer which is beyond the allowable limit, you get index out of bound exceptions. Similarly, you divide anything by 0 or do a mathematical illogical concept in your programming, you get arithmetic exception. Similarly, for null pointer exception, if you are not able to point to a particular object, you have declared something, so it will throw you a null pointer exception. Similarly, there is class cast exception. So index out of bound exception inherits two more classes, which is array index out of bound exception and string index out of bound exception. Similarly, there is one more illegal argument exception, which is again inheriting number format exception. So this falls under the runtime exception category, and runtime exception class is one of the classes of exception. Okay, then we'll come to error. Now, before we come to error, let's understand what an error is. Error is something which is caused by an unavailability of system resources. I'll tell you what it means. So there are various kinds of errors. One is an assertion error, a virtual machine error, and linkage error. These are the errors which we'll learn. I mean, there are much more, but these are the three most important classes of errors. And virtual machine error further inherits stack overflow error and out of memory error. Similarly, linkage error also inherits verify error, class format error, and no class definition found error. So all these are classes. So the classes extend the parent classes. So these are the important classes which are there. And the box in blue are actually the runtime exception or the unchecked exception, which basically happens like this. Now, since this image is of great importance, I have tried my level best to design, but I'm very poor in this. So, but still, it will suffice. At least all the words and letters and alphabets are visible. So you can keep a screenshot of this and then prepare before the interview. And so if somebody will ask you, give me a couple of examples of runtime exception or unchecked exception, you can tell them, so null pointer exception, arithmetic exception, and then they'll ask you, okay, can you give me an example of null pointer exception, how it will happen, or give me an example of arithmetic exception, how it will happen in a program. Then you can tell them, sir, if you divide by 0 and if you create an object wherein it is not pointing to anything, so that becomes a null pointer, etc., etc. So you can tell them the difference. Okay, now there is another topic which I wanted to cover over here. What is the difference between this exception and error? I have already kept a note of it, and this I have already said in my Hindi video, but this is for the English learning people. See, exceptions are mostly they mostly occur because of programming logic. I will not debate about the fact that your programming logic is right or wrong. That is irrelevant. I'm no one to debate over here. But exceptions are mostly because of programming logic. And errors mostly arise because of lack of resources. Like, let's say, for example, as I said, system failures or lack of system resources. Like your RAM is not adequate and the memory crashed. Your processor is way too slow. It was supposed to deliver the output in a certain amount of time, but it did not. On etc. 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 reasons of hardware and some other system resources. So because of those things, error comes up. And one more thing, the second difference. Programmer can solve this exception. Programmer can handle this exception. Okay, so programmer can solve, or I can say handle exceptions. So, but for errors, programmer cannot do anything. Programmer has to go to the system admin and seek his or her help to, at least counter the error or, do certain mitigation of it. Now, exception is recoverable. Fine, there is a certain logic. We will use different forms of exception. Let's say try catch block, or we'll talk about exceptions. But error is something which cannot be recovered. It either has to restart or reboot, or we have to fix that particular system or hardware issue, whatever it is, and then we'll have to begin again. So errors are more dangerous. Okay, in that regard, this is something which a logic can be. This is something which is related to logic. This is not logic. This is something which is like, it is critical. Now, exceptions are predominantly two types: compile time exceptions, runtime exceptions. But error fall into the runtime category. As the image also shows that error, even though runtime exception is part of the exception class, but the category of error falls under the runtime bit. So this is predominantly about, so I have given two notepad notes. One is a little bit about what are the different types of exceptions, what are the classes that are there, what is the difference between compile time and runtime exceptions, and please do not answer this stupidity about exceptions occurring at compile time or compile time. Don't give that answer. This is the correct answer. This is the correct answer. This is the most impressive answer which you can give to an interviewer, and he'll be much more happy. Exceptions only occur at runtime. Okay, then I told you about the simple hierarchy of exceptions. Please take a screenshot of this. I have explained the red and blue. I have specifically divided. Please be careful with these classes which I have written. I could not find space because of my very amateur designing skills in MS Paint, but typically these all classes are inherited. Okay, so that's it. I hope you liked this particular session, and if you did, please do not forget to subscribe to my channel, and thank you so much for your love and support. Sarthak here, signing off.